It's a very close call for the presidential elections in Peru. The official count of over 98% of ballots shows progressive candidate Pedro Castillo ahead of Keiko Fujimori with 50.24% of the vote. In Europe, several organisations rejected a draft resolution introduced by a group of European members of Parliament accusing Cuba of violating human rights. Jewish settlers, flanked by heavily armed Israeli special forces, again entered the AlAqsa mosque compound in occupied East Jerusalem. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. In Peru, the official count at over 98% of the ballots shows progressive candidate Pedro Castillo overcoming Keiko Fujimori by a very narrow margin of less than a percentage point. Newcomer Pedro Castillo has so far secured 50.24% of the votes, with over 83,000 more than Fujimori, who currently has 49.75% of the vote. Castillo is facing off against Keiko Fujimori, daughter of former dictator Alberto Fujimori and under investigation for corruption, who's making her third run for the presidency. Both candidates promised that they will respect the outcome of one of the closest presidential elections in Peru's history. However, Fujimori and her campaign team held a press conference on Monday to make claims of electoral fraud, even before the full results are known. Meanwhile, Castillo, whose supporters have been gathered since Monday in Lima in a spirit of celebration, spoke briefly on Monday night, pledging to serve the country and calling for calm as the results continue to come in. The full vote count could extend until Wednesday, as votes from abroad and rural areas of Peru continue to be processed. As mentioned, protesters took to the streets of Peru on Tuesday as the country awaits the result of presidential elections. Progressive candidate Pedro Castillo has been leading the count since Monday, but the vote difference between his rival, ultra-conservative Keiko Fujimori, remains very small. Supporters of both Castillo and Fujimori have rallied outside the National Office of Electoral Processes as the count continues. The allegations of fraud voiced by Fujimori's campaign team were echoed by her supporters, despite no strong evidence presented to support the claims. Meanwhile, Castillo supporters urged the Electoral Authority to declare their candidate the winner. Police in anti-riot gear patrolled the areas where the groups were gathered.
I'm here defending the votes of all Peruvians of Villa El Salvador. I was coordinator for 9 voting tables, and it's those 9 tables Keiko Fujimori has won, and the same for all Villa El Salvador. And I'm here to defend the votes of all my neighbors. We are demanding that they declare him president already. The man has won in 19 provinces, and the lady, Keiko Fujimori, has won in only 6 or 7 areas only. It's obvious they are cooking up fraud.
The Ombudsman's office in Colombia reported that the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights will evaluate more than 500 alleged human rights violations in the framework of the ongoing protests in the country, most of them at the hands of the security forces. Ombudsman Carlos Camargo stated that between April 28th and June 3rd, a total of 417 complaints were received that account for 584 human rights violations. According to the official transcript of his statement before the international delegation, the most serious violations involved 58 cases of alleged homicide, of which 45 occurred in the department of Valle del Cauca, where the capital Cali has been an epicenter of the nationwide protests. The Inter-American Commission, based in Washington and attached to the Organization of American States, is visiting Bogotá and Cali, the cities hardest hit by the crisis. Migration was the main issue to be discussed by U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris and the Mexican government of President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, as Harris arrived in Mexico this Tuesday on the second stop of her Central American tour. The U.S. Vice President was received by Foreign Minister Marcelo Ebrard and other officials. In a meeting with President López Obrador, the two signed a memorandum of understanding that will establish greater cooperation between the two nations on development programs. Harris's aides said the two leaders also discussed vaccine sharing and dealing with the root causes of migration from other countries in the region. The visit follows a conversation between Harris and López Obrador in early April, in which they also discussed the issue of migration. The immigration policies of the administration of US President Joe Biden have increased the number of so-called irregular migrants, mostly Central Americans, seeking to enter that country through Mexican territory. On Monday, a Salvadorian woman sentenced to 3 decades in prison for undergoing a therapeutic abortion was released after almost 9 years behind bars. Sarah Rogel, aged 28, left a women's prison joined by members of her family and her lawyer. As a 20-year-old student and 8 months pregnant, she lost her baby in an accident. However, she was then detained on suspicion of having had an abortion. A court found her guilty of aggravated homicide and sentenced her to 30 years in prison as part of the country's tough laws on abortion. Her lawyers later helped reduce the sentence to 10 during October 2022. After a nationwide feminist campaign, she's now free on parole. She's banned from leaving the country and must undergo therapy with a psychologist. Salvadoran laws consider abortion a crime in all cases. Penalties range from 8 to 50 years.
We are facing a resolution of a judge of penitentiary surveillance in which Sarah was granted parole given the result that she is no longer serving a sentence of 30 years, but thanks to the commutation of sentence was modified to 10 years. So according to a penitentiary law, the time she has to serve has changed to 2/3 of her sentence in order for her to be eligible for this penitentiary benefit.
Haiti postponed Monday a controversial constitutional referendum scheduled for June 27th. The coronavirus pandemic and poor training of electoral officials were quoted as reasons. A new electoral schedule will be established after recommendations from the health authorities and the technical councils of officials of the electoral institution, a statement read. Haiti has been experiencing a deep social and political crisis, aggravated by President Jovenel Moïse ruling the poorest country in the Americas by decree since legislative elections due in 2018 were delayed, and following disputes on when his term in office ends. In addition to presidential, legislative and local elections in September, Moïse had wanted to submit a new draft of the island nation's constitution to a popular vote on June 27th. Moïse has responded to popular protests with repression. Weeks of heavy rains have caused flooding in large parts of the South American nation of Guyana, turning communities into lakes and destroying farms and ranches. Some areas were still under 2 feet of water on Saturday, nearly 2 weeks after the heaviest single day of rainfall, May 27th, when about 5 inches fell in less than 24 hours, and many highways remained cut off, hampering relief efforts. The country was braced for additional bouts of rain this week. The government called a special session of Parliament on Thursday to approve emergency aid, ranging from food and water to farm materials. National Weather Service authorities said Tuesday that this year's May was the second wettest since 1981. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. In Europe, several organisations rejected a draft resolution introduced by a group of European members of Parliament accusing Cuba of violating human rights. Political forces such as the Party of the European Left rejected the manoeuvre against the revolutionary Caribbean island by the right wing in the European Parliament. They pointed out that the economic, commercial and financial blockade applied by Washington represents a true violation of human rights. The European Union should instead denounce the illegal and inhumane blockade suffered by the Cuban people for the last 62 years, the party said. Meanwhile, the European Union's High Representative for Foreign Affairs, Joseph Borrell, clarified that the official position of the EU has always been opposed to the United States blockade of Cuba.
Of the European Union and its members, not only mine, is to be against the blockade of the United States in Cuba. I'm not saying this because I am a dangerous Castroist. It is the official European Union position that is defended every year in the Security Council of the United Nations. Let's see if some of you learn this once and for all.
And we continue with the same topic because on Tuesday, a group of lawmakers to the Russian State Duma, the lower house of parliament, introduced a bill to request the United Nations General Assembly and the parliaments of its member countries condemn the United States blockade of Cuba. The document will be submitted for approval by the lower house on June 15th. The Russian parliamentarians also called for the resumption of a constructive and mutually respectful dialogue between Washington and Havana. In addition, the lawmakers intend to call for a proposal to develop concrete measures and carry out practical actions to put an end to Washington's discriminatory policies against Cuba. They also demanded the immediate and unconditional cessation of any form of pressure and sanctions, while calling for a rapid normalization of relations between the two states. On Tuesday, the United Nations War Crimes Tribunal upheld a genocide conviction and life sentence against former Bosnian Serb military commander Ratko Maladic. The former commander was convicted in 2017 on charges of genocide, crimes against humanity and war crimes, including terrorizing the civilian population of the Bosnian capital Sarajevo during a 43-month siege, and the killing of more than 8,000 Muslim men and boys in the eastern Bosnian town of Srebrenica in 1995. Maladic remained defiant throughout the proceedings since his arrest in Serbia in 2011, denying his participation in the crimes. A regular officer in the Yugoslav People's Army, he became commander of the Bosnian Serb military after the dismembering of socialist Yugoslavia. The court presiding judge Priska Matimba Najembi dissented from her peers in the judgment, considering that most of the evidence presented by prosecutors was circumstantial.
Today is a historic day, not only for us mothers, but also for the whole Balkans, Europe and the world. Today they will pass the verdict into a butcher, the biggest one to be born after Hitler in the 20th century. This verdict is not the end. Us mothers will continue to struggle because there is a lot of perpetrators of genocide that are still free men, yet to be punished.
The trial of 4 individuals suspected of being involved in the downing of the Malaysian Airlines flight over Ukraine in 2014 started in the Netherlands. The court is in a high-security location near Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam due to the large number of Dutch victims from the incident. The trial started with hearings looking at the evidence and the investigation into the crash. Defence and prosecution will then litigate until July 9th. Relatives of the victims will be allowed to address the court at some point in September. 3 Russian nationals and 1 Ukrainian citizen are being tried in absentia for the crime. The plane was en route from Amsterdam's airport to Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia and was shot down as it flew over eastern Ukraine. A missile downed the aircraft, but it's uncertain whether it came from Donbas independentists or Ukrainian forces. On Monday, a man driving a pickup truck slammed into and killed 4 members of a Muslim family in Canada's Ontario province in what authorities said was a premeditated attack motivated by hatred against Muslims. The 20-year-old suspect, arrested shortly after the attack, has been charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder. Several leaders of the Muslim community have called on the courts to classify the episode as an act of terrorism. The names of the victims were not released, but they include 3 generations of the same family, according to local authorities. A 9-year-old boy was also hospitalized following the attack and is recovering. The attack brought back painful memories of a Quebec City mosque mass shooting in January 2017 and a driving rampage in Toronto that killed 10 people in April 2018. This Tuesday, several major websites across the world crashed due to an outage at the global website hosting service Fastly. The issue appears to be related to problems at Fastly, the provider of infrastructure underpinning some of the central parts of the internet. Specifically, it seems to be an issue with content delivery networks, which host copies of web pages around the world so that they can be delivered to users faster. Newspaper websites like The Guardian, Independent, New York Times and the Financial Times all vanished from the web early on Tuesday morning before gradually reappearing again. Other websites affected included the online discussion platform Reddit, CNN and some Amazon sites. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. This Tuesday, dozens of Jewish settlers, flanked by heavily armed Israeli special forces, again entered the AlAqsa mosque compound in occupied East Jerusalem. This new provocation further raised tensions hours after Palestinian worshippers were beaten and assaulted by Israeli police in order to make way for the Israeli Jewish settlers to enter the compound. After the incident, at least 6 Palestinians were arrested, including a mosque guard who tried to film the assaults, and also an employee of the Islamic Council appointed by Jordan to oversee the AlAqsa compound. At least 63 people died in Pakistan as a result of a train collision in a remote area of southern Sindh province. 12 victims are yet to be identified. Army and civil engineers have cleared much of the wreckage, and wielders were finalising repairs to the damaged rails. The accident had reignited debates about the poor state of Pakistan's public transportation system, particularly a rail network that has seen little investment in decades. An investigation is underway to find out what caused the Millet Express to jump its tracks. A Pakistan Railway spokesman said the operation to find survivors and bodies in the wreckage had been completed and the track could reopen this Tuesday.
Some 400 to 500 of our workers are working here. The track will be restored within an hour. The upline track will be restored in half an hour, and downline track from Lahore to Karachi will be restored in half an hour as well. After that, gradually, God willing, we will increase the speed of our work till the evening, and our work will be completed in the evening. God willing, it will be completed in all respects. We are here since yesterday evening. We brought panels with us. We brought all the workers with us. Some 10 labor teams are here, which include some 150 men. We have been working since last night.
We go now to Syria. The Arab nation besieged by war and terrorism is simultaneously defeating aggression and developing its own science. This is the future first stem cell transplant and cell therapy centre for children in Syria, here being visited by Asma al-Assad, a computer scientist and wife of Syria's president, and the Minister of Higher Education and Scientific Research, Bassam Ibrahim. Paediatric patients with leukemia, different types of cancer and immunological diseases of all kinds will be treated in this soon-to-be open medical and research facility. China on Tuesday warned the United States against pursuing a trade deal with the breakaway Chinese island of Taiwan after Washington announced negotiations.
We urge the United States to implement the One China principle and provisions of the 3 China-US joint communiques, to stop any form of official exchanges with Taiwan, handle the Taiwan issue cautiously, and refrain from sending any wrong signals to Taiwan independence forces.
Likewise, a Chinese spokesperson said China resolutely rejects any US moves to boycott the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympic Games under the pretext of protecting human rights.
China firmly opposes any U.S. initiative to boycott the Beijing Winter Olympics by manipulating the so-called human rights issue. Relevant parties should immediately stop their use of the Olympic Games to engage in political manipulations and should not stand on the opposite side of athletes from all countries and Winter Olympic sports enthusiasts.
Brazil's Supreme Court scheduled an emergency sitting for Thursday to decide whether the troubled edition of the Copa America football tournament will be allowed to kick off in the country 3 days later or not. Chief Justice Luis Fux made the decision on Tuesday so that he and 10 other justices can cast their votes electronically. The result will be known at the latest sitting on Friday. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro is a staunch advocate of his country holding the tournament after a last-minute request by the South American Football Confederation, despite the fact that Brazil is the 3rd hardest hit country in the world by the pandemic in terms of case numbers and has registered the 2nd highest death toll. Bolsonaro has charged against social distancing policies, insisting without evidence that the economic impact of shutdowns kills more than the virus. Thousands of displaced people who fled the Democratic Republic of the Congo's eastern city of Goma after the eruption of a nearby volcano are torn between the joy of returning home and what they face to rebuild. About 400,000 residents out of an estimated 600,000 left the North Kivu provincial capital after a brief one-day eruption of the Nyiragongo volcano, one of the world's most active. 32 people died from lava burns or asphyxiation after the May 22nd to 23rd eruption, and 2 more died in accidents during the exodus. Many who fled the city crossed the border into neighbouring Rwanda, where they were sheltered in camps.
First of all, I am happy to see that the government has decided that we are going home, but so far we only see the movements of the buses. We are going back as we came. We do not know what life will be like in Goma. The statistics that we had, we talked about 17,500 people, so we are checking these lists again with the identifiers that are in the buses. To understand, it was only 17,000, or if the number was reduced. We came with 34 buses and the trucks are full. We think that the number will be approximately the same as that given by the head of the grouping.
Life will be complicated because I don't have a house to live in. I don't have money or an income generating activity. There is absolutely nothing and it's very complicated.
And we've come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also follow us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram, plus you can catch up on our shows on our YouTube channel. For teleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss and thank you for watching.